I joked half-heartedly about cancelling my wedding, but things spiraled out of control in a way I never could have imagined. My brother, who until that moment I believed was just a regular, supportive sibling, ended up confessing his long-time romantic feelings for my fiancée. While doing so, he abandoned his pregnant wife without a second thought, and somehow managed to twist the narrative so thoroughly that most of my family turned against me and Olivia. Now I'm left feeling guilty, like I may have inadvertently torn my entire family apart over what was supposed to be a harmless, light-hearted remark. Let me try to break down what happened and explain it in more detail. I'm a 26-year-old man, and 6 months ago, I got engaged to my stunning fiancée, Olivia, who is 25. Olivia and I have known each other practically our whole lives, having grown up as neighbors in the same quiet little community. We attended the same kindergarten, and as children, we were pretty much attached at the hip until high school came around. Once we reached the later teenage years, our friendship evolved into romance when I was 18 and she was 17. We later endured a challenging long-distance phase for 4 years while both of us were in college, longing for each other's presence, passing time with calls and texts until we finished our degrees. The very moment I graduated, I made the decision to close the physical gap between us. I moved directly to her city and launched my own small business there. I couldn't bear the distance any longer, and the timing worked out perfectly. She was still pursuing her nursing degree, and I was in a position to put down roots and start building a future for us. We lived together in a modest apartment for about a year, during which Olivia diligently finished her nursing school program while I poured all my energy into growing my business into something stable and profitable. The sacrifices and the hustle were worth it. My business began thriving, and Olivia, who had just completed nursing school, landed a position as a pediatric nurse. It was a milestone period in our life together, a time when both our careers started taking off after that challenging long-distance era. We'd been living together happily for a year, adjusting to adult life side by side and planning our future. At the end of that blissful period, I finally mustered the courage and excitement to do something I'd dreamed about for as long as I can remember. I asked Olivia to marry me. I created the perfect moment, nervous but thrilled, and to my immeasurable relief, she said yes. Though we got engaged roughly 2 years ago, we decided to be practical first. We wanted to save enough money to buy a home together before investing our resources in a wedding ceremony. Neither of us was big on extravagant weddings, so we figured waiting wouldn't hurt. After all, we were secure in our love, and we knew a big celebration wasn't the core of what made our bond special. The past 2 years had been everything we hoped for. Both of us were making solid income, we were preparing to purchase a home, and thinking maybe in the following year we could finally tie the knot and possibly start a family of our own. It felt like a slow but beautiful climb toward the life we'd both imagined as kids running around the same neighborhood. Things were going smoothly, until an offhand joke of mine set off a catastrophic chain of events that upended my family. It was a single sentence, a silly quip made at a family gathering just last week, and I had no idea it would become the catalyst for all this heartbreak. It all started at a dinner my parents hosted to celebrate their wedding anniversary. They invited me, Olivia, my younger sister Kate, as well as my older brother Jake and his wife Rachel. Now, Jake and Rachel haven't been married long, about a year and a half, and they are currently expecting their first child. I'm emphasizing this detail because it becomes horrifically relevant later on. We were sitting around my parents' dinner table, enjoying a nice homemade meal and drinking wine. The atmosphere was warm, cheerful, and filled with casual banter. My dad, who has a reputation for making playful jabs, teased Olivia and me about our long engagement. He made a joke along the lines of whether we ever planned on actually walking down the aisle or if we intended to remain eternally engaged. I knew he meant no harm. My dad adores Olivia, has known her since she was a little girl, and already considered her part of the family. Everyone at that table understood it was a light tease, not a serious critique of our relationship or intentions. Feeling relaxed and perhaps a bit too playful due to the wine, I responded with something along the lines of, "Yeah, it's a lot of work to plan a wedding. Maybe we should just call it off and skip the hassle altogether." I honestly thought it would be perceived as a harmless, witty remark meant to amuse everyone, including Olivia. I loved her with all my heart and could never imagine backing out of our plans. I expected her to understand that and maybe roll her eyes or giggle. Unfortunately, that's not how it landed. Instead, Olivia's face fell, and to my shock, she burst into tears right there at the dinner table. I was immediately horrified and deeply regretful. I tried to explain, stumbling over my words, apologizing passionately, reassuring her that I was only joking and that I couldn't wait to be her husband. But the damage was done. She got up and ran to the bathroom, sobbing, clearly hurt and humiliated. I followed her and tried to coax her out of the bathroom, frantically apologizing and insisting that I meant nothing by it. She wouldn't open the door. Eventually, I had to return to the table, feeling like an absolute failure of a partner. Everyone at the table was rattled. No one had an appetite anymore, and the mood had soured beyond repair. My mother and sister went to comfort Olivia, while my dad just sat there looking stunned. They gently informed me that Olivia would prefer some space and planned to stay over at their home for the night, without me. I tried apologizing again to her from behind the closed door, sent her heartfelt texts after I left, and spent the rest of the night racked with guilt and remorse. I was certain that after a night of rest and reflection, we could talk it out calmly the next day and move forward, stronger than before. But I never could have predicted how much worse things would get. I slept late, filled with anxiety and regrets, and awoke the next morning feeling tense but hopeful that Olivia would text me to clear the air. That hope was dashed when I saw my phone was completely dead. I had forgotten to charge it in my distress. I charged it and powered it on, expecting maybe a text from Olivia saying we needed to talk. Instead, I was greeted by a shocking barrage of missed calls and urgent messages. There were frantic attempts to reach me not only from Olivia but also from my mother, my father, my sister, and even my sister-in-law. My heart began to pound, panic setting in as my imagination ran wild. Why would everyone be trying to reach me so desperately, and so early in the morning? I tried calling Olivia first, but she wouldn't answer. My anxiety deepened. So I called my mom next, and she answered by practically yelling down the line, demanding to know where I had been and why my phone had been off. When I stammered that I'd just forgotten to plug it in, she brusquely told me to stop wasting time and come home immediately. Her tone was filled with fury and anguish, and I had no clue why. Terrified, I jumped in my car and rushed over to my parents' house, my mind racing with dark scenarios. Was Olivia hurt? Was there some family emergency? My calls to Olivia kept going unanswered, and that only made me more frantic. Within 15 excruciating minutes, I reached my parents' home. As soon as I parked, I could hear shouting coming from inside, echoing through the walls. My stomach dropped. I sprinted to the door, rushing through the hallways until I found everyone crammed into the kitchen, yelling and crying all at once. The sight was surreal. Olivia stood there, visibly distressed, my mother was screaming at the top of her lungs, and my sister stood nearby looking mortified. My mom's eyes found me and she erupted with accusations, telling me that my idiocy had doomed the family. I was stunned into silence. I managed to ask my sister what happened, but she just told me to ask Olivia directly. Strangely, my mom still addressed Olivia as my fiancée but no longer used her affectionate nickname, which was a disorienting detail in that chaos. Olivia suggested we talk in private, and we retreated to my old bedroom. My heart was pounding. I was sweating, shaking, and desperately hoping for some logical explanation for all this madness. Once we were alone, I pleaded with Olivia to tell me what the hell had happened that morning. She took a breath, clearly shaken, and asked me to stay calm and listen. She began explaining something that sounded like a script from some terrible melodrama. Early that morning, my brother Jake had shown up at the front door of my parents' home, where Olivia had spent the night. He was there to talk to her, and Olivia, puzzled but not yet alarmed, agreed to take a walk around the block to discuss whatever he had on his mind. On this short stroll, Jake started by asking how she felt after the previous night's emotional meltdown. Olivia answered that she felt better and had tried calling me already. She mentioned she planned on returning to me after breakfast. Instead of offering comforting or brotherly words, Jake's tone shifted. He began criticizing me, saying he'd watched us for years and believed I didn't treat Olivia with the kindness and respect she deserved. He claimed I wasn't worthy of her, that she was settling for me, and that she should expect more from a partner. Olivia, shocked and uncomfortable, tried to defend me. She explained that I could be silly sometimes, that I occasionally made ill-timed jokes, but that I truly loved her and would never knowingly hurt her. Jake ignored her defense and cut her off, insisting she should stop pretending and raise her standards. He then dropped the bombshell. He confessed he had been in love with her for years, secretly hoping that we would break up one day so he could step in and become her partner. Olivia was so taken aback by this confession that she initially thought it was some bizarre prank. She even asked if I'd put him up to it. Jake assured her it was no joke. He admitted he only married Rachel because he'd given up hope on ever having Olivia and settled for what he thought was second best. Now, seeing an opportunity, perhaps he misconstrued Olivia's upset reaction from the night before he had abruptly left his pregnant wife. He suggested that he and Olivia run away together and start a new life, possibly even eloping to seal the deal. Olivia was revolted by this outrageous proposition and immediately told him so. She reprimanded him sharply, calling him a monstrous person for doing this to his wife, especially with a baby on the way. She stormed off and returned to the house, intending to say goodbye to my family and leave, wanting to keep this humiliating incident private for everyone's sake. but fate had another cruel twist waiting. When Olivia came back inside, she stumbled into a scene where my sister-in-law, Rachel, had arrived in a hysterical state. Rachel had woken up that morning to find her husband gone and a note on their bedside table. In that heartbreaking letter, Jake wrote that he couldn't continue living a lie and was leaving to pursue Olivia, whom he claimed to have loved for all these years. Rachel discovered he had packed some clothes and personal items. She tried calling him, only to find that he had blocked her. Desperate and distraught, she rushed to my parents' place, hoping to find Jake there. Instead, she encountered Olivia, and in her mind, she linked Olivia to this betrayal immediately. Rachel lost control and lunged at Olivia, screaming, calling her horrible names like homewrecker. My sister had to physically hold Rachel back. My mother, horrified and ashamed, lashed out at Olivia, probably because it was easier than accepting her own son's treachery. My dad tried to intervene, but my mom ordered him to stay out of it. They tried to call me, but since my phone was off, they couldn't reach me. Rachel stormed out, vowing never to forgive anyone in this family for what she had just endured. She declared that we would never be allowed near her unborn child. In the aftermath, Olivia tried to explain that she had no idea any of this was coming, that Jake's confession was as shocking to her as it was to everyone else. But my mom and sister chose not to believe her. They were determined to blame Olivia, and, by extension, me, for this catastrophic mess. When I arrived, they unleashed their anger on me too, telling me that everything could have been avoided if I'd just kept my mouth shut at dinner and never made that stupid joke. That logic was painfully flawed. Even if my joke had been in poor taste, nothing I said or did justified my brother's appalling behavior. He was the one who betrayed his pregnant wife, the one who tried to seduce my fiancée. Yet somehow, to my mom and sister, Olivia and I were responsible for all this drama. They refused to see reason, to acknowledge my brother's massive wrongdoing. It was as if they had entered a bizarre alternate reality. Realizing I couldn't reason with them in their current state, I asked Olivia to wait for me in the car while I tried to talk to my mother and sister privately. I wanted to stand up for Olivia and demand an apology on her behalf. But my mother turned hostile, saying she would never show Olivia a shred of kindness, accusing her of seducing my brother, calling her vile names. I was furious. How could they believe such nonsense? How could they think that Olivia, who had been part of our family for so long, would do something so disgusting? My sister chimed in, supporting my mother's twisted logic. She insisted Olivia must have led Jake on for him to feel confident enough to leave his wife. My mother lamented about how this ruined her chance at being a grandmother since Rachel threatened to keep the baby away. In the end, they kicked me out of the house too, telling me never to set foot there again. I left with Olivia, feeling heartbroken and enraged. Olivia and I returned home, both of us emotionally devastated. The cruelty and stupidity of this situation were almost too much to process. I kept replaying their accusations in my mind, wondering if I was somehow blind or if I had missed any clues. Deep down, I knew none of this was our fault. My joke, though ill-timed, was just a trivial comment compared to the monstrous betrayal my brother had committed. Yet here we were, ostracized by my family, accused of things we never did. My dad reached out later, but only to say that my mother and sister wanted no contact with us. He was trying to remain neutral, but he was no help in resolving the situation. I felt disowned, thrown aside because I refused to let my family dump the blame on Olivia. Some time later, I posted an update, wanting people to know a bit more about what had happened and why Olivia reacted so strongly to my initial joke. I asked Olivia if she was okay with me sharing those personal details, and she gave me permission. I also wanted to reassure everyone that Olivia had forgiven me for my poor attempt at humor. Our relationship remained loving and steadfast, despite the chaos swirling around us. The truth is that although Olivia and I agreed to delay our wedding and focus on buying a home first, she had recently become a bit insecure about the entire engagement. She overheard co-workers gossiping about how long we'd been engaged without tying the knot. They insinuated it was a permanent engagement and that maybe I wasn't serious about her. This deeply hurt Olivia's feelings, though she never told me about it at the time. She was trying to be rational, to trust in our plan and the future we had in mind, but the seeds of doubt had been planted by those careless whispers at her workplace. When I joked about calling off the wedding, it struck a raw nerve. She had already endured my dad's teasing about the never-ending engagement and kept her composure, but when I made a similar comment, it felt like I was confirming those hurtful whispers. It felt like I was adding salt to the wound. She burst into tears because she was embarrassed and hurt, her insecurities rushing to the surface. Once I learned about all this, I felt terrible for not noticing how she felt sooner. We talked it out, reassured each other of our love, and decided to have a small ceremony within the next 6 months. We had always wanted a nice beach wedding after buying a house, but now we agreed that protecting our relationship and security mattered more than extravagant plans. Given all the family drama, planning a wedding now sounds like a nightmare, but as long as Olivia is by my side, I know we can manage anything together. The situation with my family, however, was still in disarray. My mother and sister remained hostile, and my father tried to stay out of it, worried about my mother's emotional state and their access to their future grandchild. My brother was nowhere to be found. He blocked our calls, ignored all attempts at communication. It was a sickening mess. I considered how bizarre it was that my brother had never once shown any sign of these feelings for Olivia before. We'd been close since we were children, and he was 4 years older than me. If he wanted Olivia, he had countless opportunities to ask her out before we officially got together. Even during the year-long break Olivia and I took during our long-distance stage, he never tried to pursue her. Now, out of the blue, he pulled this cruel stunt, leaving his pregnant wife and confessing his love. It made no sense. Olivia and I felt awful for Rachel too. She was a victim in this twisted scenario, left pregnant and heartbroken. We tried contacting her to explain that Olivia had no idea Jake would do this, but Rachel refused to speak to us. After a few attempts, we decided to respect her boundaries. I held on to the hope that, with time, my family would realize their mistake and at least apologize to Olivia, who deserved none of their venom. Time passed, and I posted another update, explaining that things had gotten even more complicated. To my shock, my brother returned to Rachel after a few weeks. He claimed he'd made a terrible error, that he wasn't thinking straight, and he put the blame on Olivia, saying she had been sending him signals for years. I don't know how he fabricated such a ridiculous lie, but incredibly, Rachel believed it. The conditions for their reconciliation were harsh. Rachel demanded that my brother cut all ties with me and Olivia forever. And she insisted that my parents and sister also sever their connection with us if they wanted to remain in their future grandchild's life. My mother and sister complied. They chose my brother, the admitted betrayer, over me and Olivia. They chose access to a future grandkid over fairness, truth, and reason. My father informed me of this decision. He told me not to fight it. I was devastated. Olivia felt terrible, blaming herself for being some sort of catalyst for my family's downfall, no matter how irrational it all was. I assured her it wasn't her fault. I was furious at my family for betraying their own morals. As I updated people further, I mentioned that Olivia and I were struggling with the weight of my family's betrayal. But then a new, desperate idea crossed our minds. We knew my brother was lying. We knew he only crawled back to Rachel because Olivia would never leave me for him. So we concocted a risky plan to expose him and hopefully clear Olivia's name. Olivia bravely agreed to fake interest in my brother to lure him into a trap. If he was truly changed, he would resist. But if he was still the same sleazeball, he would fall right into our hands. She visited his workplace during his lunch hour, pretending she had realized what a mistake she'd made by turning him down, taking off her engagement ring to convince him she was serious. As expected, my brother swallowed the bait without hesitation. Meanwhile, I had the tougher job of convincing Rachel to come to the restaurant where I arranged this meeting, so she could witness his betrayal firsthand. Surprisingly, Rachel agreed to meet me. Perhaps deep down she suspected the truth. Olivia arrived with my brother, playing the part of a conflicted woman, and he wasted no time leaning into his old confession. That's when Rachel, waiting in the wings, confronted him. She was furious, hurling accusations and a drink in his face. My brother reacted with anger, yelling at Olivia, but I stepped in to defend her. I punched him square in the face, tired of his manipulative behavior. We walked out of there, Olivia, Rachel, and I united in this sickening discovery of my brother's true nature. We drove straight to my mother's home to lay out the truth. At first, my mother and sister couldn't believe their eyes or ears. But as the story sunk in and Rachel backed us up, my mother broke down in tears and apologized profusely to Olivia and me. My sister followed suit, acknowledging how wrong they had been to accuse Olivia. Finally, I had my family back, or at least the part of them that mattered, the part willing to acknowledge reality. In the aftermath, we made it abundantly clear that my brother was no longer welcome. Rachel's well-being and that of her unborn child mattered more to us than his comfort. She deserved a loyal, loving partner who would never betray her trust. Olivia and I vowed to be there for Rachel and the baby, offering the support and kindness she needed. Although we were all shaken, we held on to each other, certain that with time, wounds could heal, trust could rebuild, and my brother would have to face the consequences of his shameful actions alone.